Welcome, you're listening to the IT/OT Insider podcast. Today we are joined by the authors of the book Unbundling the Enterprise. And for those who are watching, I'm showing it right now here on the camera. So we're joined by Stephen Fishman. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, David.
And by Matt McLarty. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
So Stephen is the North American field CTO at Boomi, and Matt is their Chief Technology Officer. Now, for those who have seen our mini book library on the blog, you know that we strongly believe in applying principles from the IT world to digitalization in the industry, and that's exactly what we'll be talking about today with Stephen and Matt. So as an introduction, instead of doing the normal personal one, why don't you tell us your backstory? Like, where did you meet? How did you start writing?
I'll go first here, Matt. So Matt and I met probably around 2012, I think is about right, when I was leading application development over at Cox Automotive, and Matt was leading a group called the API Academy at CA at the time. That's Computer Associates, and we were building towards a future of API-driven experiences across all of our different ways for engagement with the automotive industry. And I was also in the process of doing a lot more creative writing out in the world because I came from a big design background and working on a bunch of technology stuff, but I needed a creative outlet. I think Matt discovered some of my writing. I discovered the API Academy, and we had a lot of shared interest in the time because I was writing all about APIs and stuff. And we came together then, and since that point, we've been looking for various different opportunities to work together and collaborate, and that eventually became the book.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say back at that time we first met, it was a relatively small community of people talking about and writing about APIs.
Yeah.
And it's flourished since then, obviously. So by the time we did get together, so that was serendipity, happy accident, I suppose, that we connected that way. But we ended up both working at MuleSoft for a period of time, and now we're together working at Boomi. But in that time, with the explosion of APIs being so foundational for cloud computing, mobile, social, now AI, everything, when it came time to write the book, we didn't want to write just another API book. I mean, there's great books there that are very focused on practices around API architecture, design, API management. There's some really good stuff out there. We were looking at it more from instead of looking at APIs and looking in, let's take APIs as something to go out from, right? And see if these companies like Google and Amazon and, other sort of companies like Cox and Best Buy were being successful and they had APIs. What was the bigger story there? Using the APIs more of the tip of the iceberg and going deeper on it. So that's really where the book came from. So we ended up, letting the book to a degree really focusing on the companies, interviewing these organizations who'd been successful with APIs and looking for the bigger story that related to APIs. And that's why I think it's a pretty sort of a different book when it comes to the API literature that's out there.
Yeah, there was a big motivator at the time when we were trying to figure out what we were going to write. There was a big idea around a lot of engineers and architects, they would try to work with their product leaders or their scrum leaders or their executive management on bringing in modularity and into their product set. And it was my experience, and Matt, I think, shared the same point of view, that those sorts of requests for doing these things would be met with the idea of, oh, that's just the nerds wanting to do what the nerds want to do, and not that there's a lot of business advantage in that. And we wanted to, it was a big goal to bridge that gap, to help engineers and architects actually be able to articulate the financial and business value of modularity and why it works the way it does. And similarly to people from the other side in the business architect world or in the finance world, be able to actually see, oh, these are how those dots connect. And this is why my technology people want to do these things, and now I get it. I know there's real value to be had there.
Okay. I assume that the company that you both are working in, Boomi, is also linked to that somehow. Could you maybe tell our listeners what it is that Boomi actually does?
Yeah, I mean, Boomi has a pretty strong pedigree in the integration space. So we've been, probably the original iPaaS integration platform as a service pack at the time that cloud was exploding and mobile was exploding and so on. So really there to connect systems. Over that same period of time, and we're describing APIs evolving, Boomi has grown to include API management and data management and governance, and now very much at the sort of epicenter of the whole AI space, because AI is exciting, AI is exploding, there's all sorts of technology innovation. The reality is a lot of companies are not yet able to harness the value of generative AI, probably because it's hard, trying to get their own data working in conjunction with Gen AI, connect to their own application endpoints is really how you get business value out of AI. So we're very involved in that as well. But as it relates to the overall story of optionality, composability, modularity, really the platform is built to help organizations expose their digital assets in a way that maximizes optionality.
We could do two things, right? So obviously, I want to go a bit deeper into what APIs are, especially for our, I would say more the OT audience, the operational audience we have on this podcast. But actually, first, because you mentioned optionality, etc. So why don't we step into what you guys are calling like OOOPs or OOPs, or how do we have to pronounce this?
Oops. Well, that
Oops.
actually came from, I guess, Happy Accidents definitely came first. So we were sitting in a room here in Vancouver writing the book, and we started getting excited about this. Like we kept finding the same thing. I mean, Stephen, you tell the story better than me. Like we just found that, every company we were talking to, they kept saying, oh, we were doing this one thing, but then something happened over here, and we realized, oh, we didn't expect that to happen, but that's good. And we kind of jumped on it.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways to tell this is this, we did not intend to write the book the way at the beginning. Like the Happy Accident thing found us, and
right. It was a happy accident.
Yeah, it was a happy accident.
Very meta.
Through, close to 20 different interviews with CIOs, CTOs, and various, VPs of app dev at various different organizations around the globe, and every single one of them said the exact same thing. They said, just like Matt said, we built this thing in this modular fashion with APIs because that's what the nerd said to do. And then this other thing just kind of sprung out of that, and it caught us by surprise. And so we reinvested a little bit there, and it just kept going over and over and over again. And like one of the most crystal examples is Google Maps, which we talk about a little bit about in the book. And I happen to be friends with Thor Mitchell, who was one of the product leaders at Google at the time. And he told us this amazing story, which was, everybody uses Google Maps as a GPS today. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And they launched it, and random developers out in the web clicked view source on the web pages, saw the API behind it, that it was built that way just because it was built that way. And then people started scraping the API itself and to build embedded maps, like organizations like Uber or Airbnb or Yelp and things like that. And then they literally called Google and said, hey, we're violating the terms of service here, and we're betting our business on this. And we think that if we don't pay you, that it will go away. Can we please pay you for this service? So like Google Maps is now like a 7, 8, 9 figure ARR for Google specifically in the API space. And like, they didn't intend that. That was a happy accident for them. And like Thor was one of the first people we spoke to. And then like 10 other people said the exact same thing. Some of it was revenue generating with direct calls. Some of it was internal value. Some of it was driving a bunch of other business ecosystem things. And every single one said the exact same thing. We built X. random use case Y showed up. It just so happened that we were already ready to do that. That informed a lot of the theme of the book, which is preparation beats prediction. And then Happy Accidents emerged out of that, because like Slack was a video game company before they became the fastest growing SaaS company in the world. And whether it was a digital giant or not, it didn't matter.
Yeah. Actually, if I can, maybe I can link the two things around APIs and optionality, because I think we're sort of telling the broader story about Happy Accidents. So, I mean, APIs are loosely defined. Everyone who's in the software space knows APIs in terms of library APIs and so on. When we're talking about APIs, we are generally talking about web APIs, meaning ways that you can connect software components across the web via these programmable interfaces. So APIs, like I mentioned off the top, were instrumental. I would say even at the dawn of the web, right? The way companies could do any sort of connections across the web was through APIs. Web services was an early form of it, but all those evolutionary steps in the web, from on the outside, going to mobile devices, going to cloud computing, Web 2.0, connecting social networks, all those things were all enabled by. We may think of the web as browser-based, but really it's this connective network that connects all these software components. So, but they have interesting properties. So the OOPs that you mentioned, which we really force in that one, like, because
it is OOPs. Okay,
it is because when an accident happens, you say oops. So it is meant to be linked to happy accidents. The optionality is the first of the OOPs. So they all start with OP. That's how we have this convoluted OOPs. But optionality is this property where it's something, as Stephen said, it was always intuitive for us, but putting a name on it has really helped, because especially in that business, that goal of, can we get IT to communicate to business people the value of building things in a certain way? Mm-hmm. So there's a whole field of study around optionality. Dr. Carlos Baldwin at Harvard University has written books on it. I think she just released her second book, Design Rules Volume 2, which gets into this a lot more. But she came from the finance world, where she was helping measure option value in investments. So we think of stock options and so on. When you have optionality in the investment world, you can quantify, here's a really huge thing, part of value that you can measure in your investment portfolio, this option value. So she sort of transposed that into the technology world and studied optionality and modularity in systems that were being built, and sort of proved that the power of optionality in how we architect systems. So I think this was great, because it's a way of showing that, if you were to build a system that's very monolithic, that just does, it's a big solution to solve one big problem, it becomes very hard to decouple or unbundle pieces of that solution for other uses. And we had this whole, we have APIs, we've had microservice architecture in the software engineering world. There was service-oriented architecture before that. There's always been this understanding that modular systems are better, but this is a way of really putting it in financial terms to measure. So when you build systems that are unbundled components through APIs, that are more plug and play, that are more like building a platform that can be recomposed for different purposes, you have a higher degree of optionality. So this is something that APIs bring. However, if you just API enable everything, then it becomes diminishing returns, right? You're not going to take every single thing, break it down. So the second one is around optimization. How do you around opportunism. How do you know where to start? Because as Stephen said, we want to do preparation, not prediction. So we do want to be open-minded and build things in this composable way, but it would be nice to know where we should start. So opportunism is about figuring out the right places to unbundle first, or the right ways to build first. And that we have something called value dynamics, value exchange mapping, which is sort of a visual technique of looking at the different connection points in really a business map, your business model, showing your business model as a set of value exchanges between third parties, between internal departments, and so on. And the way that links to APIs is APIs are often the digital channel that makes those exchanges happen. And then finally, optimization is about continually measuring and seeing, okay, if this is our starting point, how do we know what's working, what's not working, where do we focus? And the good thing about APIs, again, is they're easily instrumented. You can get a lot more data about behavior. Not only are you serving up data through APIs, you can instrument your business through APIs much more easily. So that's the quick view of what OOPs and happy accidents are all about.
So one financial thing that closes the loop on the three different methods is that there's in the optionality space, there's like when you build things in this API fashion, it lowers the cost of being able to take advantage of a thing that you do and bring it to market.
Yeah.
But by being as consistent as you can within the realm of the value dynamics thing, being able to find the right places to invest, you just keep lowering the cost of trial for what you're able to do by combining things and bringing them to market. And by bringing that cost of trial down, it enables you to spread your bets wider, such that you're more prepared for whatever the future brings. Because you're not betting on a single future, you're betting on multiple futures. And that when any one of them becomes the new paradigm in the marketplace or in the world, you're much closer. And because you're much closer, you can invest in more options again. And you can keep on doubling down. One of the phrases we use in the book is casinos don't gamble. Casinos know how to work the math by setting the table. And we're trying to teach organizations how to become the house.
How does that go? Because if I'm looking at the industries that we're working in, manufacturing, I mean, they think in big projects. I mean, plants are by definition, it's like big monolithic things. You define them well beforehand because you're not going to build them over and over again. How do you get people to think in that optionality way of how do they see the reality in that way?
So this may be because I'm an automotive guy, because I came out of a lot of that work, but this is like the manufacturing world knows this, like especially in the car world. Cars have built in optionality from the ground up. That's a platform. I know there's a lot of, technology nerds on this listening to the podcast. Platform existed before the internet community. And I'm a nerd. I use the term with love. That concept came out of automotive. That was the platform it's a decontextualized version of a car that can have any sort of body or engine strapped into it. That is effectively the same as when we talk about in APIs, a decontextualized capability that is optimized for machine consumption, not human consumption. And because the car companies invested in platforms, not the technical kind, the automotive type of platform, they could build whatever they were ready to bring down the cost of developing a car as consumer taste change. And that was amongst the biggest things that came out in the research with Carlos Baldwin, is that the value of optionality skyrockets when consumer tastes are heterogeneous and unpredictable, meaning people change their tastes and what they like fairly often, that people are fickle. That's just the nature of humanity. And because people change their taste, if your ability to respond to their taste is faster and cheaper, then you will win, because you'll be there right at the moment when they're there. That's why investing in modularity brings down your cost to change. Therefore, as consumers and the market changes, you're closer and more ready to pounce on what that change is.
Yeah. There are definitely some real constraint differences, though, I think, in the operating the pure software space versus the physical world. I think, a couple of things. The original opening of the book was focused on actually a transformation of during the Industrial Revolution from steam power to electrical power. And we had a much more thorough write-up on how that, the steam world was these big plants centered around a giant steam engine and boiler and everything, and how that was constraining. And then electricity sort of allowed the unbundling of the manufacturing process. So we've been through iterations of this going back hundreds of years. But I think maybe for a more current example, like the network world went from a very, I think, distinct, the data plane and sort of the operating technology for networks versus the management technology, which was more IT-ish. They've gone through a whole transformation now where we've gone to more software-defined networking, and there's been a level of evolution of much more modularity in the networking world. I think that can happen in the manufacturing world for sure. But one of the things we do talk about a lot in the book is we look into the economics of data and this difference between rivalrous products and non-rival products, where non-rival products can be consumed by everyone at once, whereas rival products, there is a constraint. Like a single car is a rival product because you can only sell it to one customer, they drive it around, whereas something like media can be broadcast to multiple sources. So you're always going to run into some of these physical constraints, I think, in the manufacturing world. But to Stephen's point, I think finding the balance between what is the static platform or framework or chassis, whatever it is that's in place, how do you get the optionality to work within that? I think there's a lot of potential there in the manufacturing world.
That's a very interesting take, and it's also I think it's one we really need to take into account in our world. And I would say, as a small side remark, you have a very interesting article on OOOPs, which is published on the IT Revolution blog, and I'll also link that in the show notes and in the article for those who are interested. I want to take a step to another topic, and that's the S curve of growth. And that's interesting because we talked about that before having read the book and before, I would say, knowing the name, the S curve of growth. We talked about it in the article we titled "It's the Platform Stupid." So I think we're kind of aligned on that. So where I would say our take was that in order to hit that inflection point, you need to do something. You can't just keep on throwing resources and money to a problem. You need to somehow get into that point where transformation projects, they take on a life on its own. So could you guys introduce us to the S curve of growth a bit more? Maybe with an example or.
All right, I think I'll try here, and that's we talk about that. I think a lot of that conversation came out of one of our interviews with David Rice, who is senior leader of technology over at Cox Automotive, and the way David phrased it was, and a lot of this came out of the interview. But like both Matt and I were familiar with S curves, but I don't think we really understood the nuance and the power and how that worked in a technology type of driven organization. And the thing that David said was most people in your organization will not know or even know how to know where they are on the S curve of, like, are they at the top of the mature ecosystem and they've squeezed all the juice out of that lemon possible, or are they in the middle, or are they in the bottom? And they just don't know. And when you're trying to, like, from a technology and leadership perspective, engage with business teams about investing in preparation or investing for many futures, you're not really having a real conversation where everybody can agree where you are. And so as a result, the business teams, they don't hear like, oh, we had to prepare for this rainy day, or we had to prepare for this future that hasn't come yet. What they actually hear is, you don't want me to invest in revenue today on the thing that I've already got working. You want me to stop investing in revenue for this thing that I have working. And they see the world as opportunity cost. And so where they think the S curve is going to go on forever, like, so why wouldn't I just keep investing in just bigger and bigger and more things on the exact same paradigm that I see now? And the world generally doesn't work that way. Things that go up must come down.
Unfortunately.
and and I didn't mean to come back to this, but that led us to the exact thing that Carlos Baldwin was talking about when she mapped the value of having options as time evolves. And you could translate the math from Carlos Baldwin over to, here is a financial valuation mechanism for being able to see why investing in this way will both open up the next S curve and help you maximize your ability to find the winning option. Where this brings us over to another academic, probably a little bit more well known than Carlos Baldwin, is Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote Anti-Fragile, Fooled by Randomness, The Black Swan, a bunch of other books, and he really laid out. He took what was deep math and statistics from Carlos Baldwin. I'm not saying he drew it directly from Baldwin, but like he took a lot of that deeply academic stuff and made it more generically consumable into finance world, at a deeper type of level that was more understandable by humans. And he really lays out how it's not just investing in optionality, but investing in serial optionality, where organization can take small winning options that are showing some sign of life and double down. And that's what he calls convex tinkering, because it's not all options are good. It's convex options are the best options, which are low cost to create and preserve, high asymmetric value when they do hit. And that, I'm sorry, I know we're getting super wonky now. That comes back to what Matt said about non-rival product. Non-rival product, because it can be shared amongst N people, millions and billions and whoever, and because it can be shared with them at a low cost, meaning like the cost of standing up a digital service is generally, when you hit critical mass of a lot of populace, that cost is already in the rearview mirror. And so any new subscriber to a non-rival product, when the cost is already done, that's fixed cost in the past, it flips variable cost and fixed cost around and creates this asymmetric revenue opportunity, which is what drives like these enormous wins. That's why SaaS companies like Google Maps, as the example we talked about earlier, are valued higher than non-SaaS companies, because you can create digital things that effectively become money printing machines. Once the cost to serve has already been covered, these digital players, even from the manufacturing world, win over and over again, by taking physical things that are made today and surrounding them with other digital value events and other digital things on top of them. Those things have this possibility for asymmetric value return. And if you can keep the cost low to bring these things out, you will find that one of them will hit and become that asymmetric revenue opportunity, an asymmetric growth opportunity for you. And that will drive all your financial results in the right way.
Yeah. I think also the way that you're mentioning it now sounds like it's only something for a SaaS company or a tech company out there. But I think also the same applies on a smaller scale in internal teams working for internal stakeholders, where, of course, they're not going to take on the whole world, but with small efforts, they can have scalable benefits across the entire enterprise. And once they pay the fixed cost of figuring out how it works, deploying it goes much faster than you would guess.
True. And we found the book does not just dwell on, the digital giants of the world. There's examples from Best Buy, from Coca-Cola, from a number of, from L Brands, from Lowe's, that all follow the same pattern, including revenue opportunity. Like a great example from our interview with the former CIO of Coca-Cola, their IT team originally invested in some, an API that would enable some visual camera stuff, where they originally used it to count bottles of soda and cases of soda on shelves. It was an inventory tool. So instead of counting by hand, they could take a picture and know know their stock levels. They took that, reused it like 2 or 3 different times, and eventually it became this other thing that was consumer market facing, where they would send like generic Coke drinkers into a store to take pictures of the cooler that they bought their Coke product from. And they did that for a couple different reasons, mostly because merchants weren't following the rules for when Coke gave them the cooler. You had to merchandise Coke products in this particular way. And so some merchants would put whatever they wanted in there. Some people would do it in, minor violations, et cetera. And Coke didn't want to start going into all their retailers and chastising them. So instead, they reused the photo tool. And people started taking pictures to show their love for the product. And they were able to both drive compliance at the merchant in the right direction without investing any labor, because they got all consumers to do it. And they also drove Coke consumption, right? So they moved all the numbers in the right direction with having no actual significant technology investment at all. That's the beauty of decontextualized services, is it makes these low-cost opportunities right up to the surface, bang, and you can reinvest, and create these amazing asymmetric wins.
That's crowdsourcing. That's crowdsourcing for you.
Yeah, and it's also something you could never imagine when creating that API. Yeah, I think I will create something, and the business case for that API will be that we will one day have this one scenario. It's just having it there is that optionality that you guys are talking about. Now, moving away to another topic, I think probably the last one, David, given our time. You guys also interviewed David Rice, who is SVP Product and Engineering at Cox Automotive. And one of the things that we saw that stood out was he said that all organization designs suck. So I think David and I, we also like to think about the impact of organizational designs and all the problems they give. So can you maybe tell a little more about that one?
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about it. I'm sure Stephen has stuff to add, but I think it was there's these moments where somebody says something in a pithy way that captures like a lifetime of experience, right? It's so true. I think the add-on statement was all organization designs suck, so you need to focus on compensating for the areas where they suck, something along those lines, right? Which is, if you're going to organize this way, then be aware that these are the problems that are going to come up, and you need to have compensating factors for it. And I think what's like in our work, I was going to say this, we were talking about S-curves and really about what really that's like paradigm shifting stuff. There's so much, it's not like it's one technology innovation that breaks the S-curve, right? It's usually a combination of things. And I think that I was going to say on that point, like the more unbundled you are, the more you can take from the old paradigm and reapply it to the new, because it's not like you throw everything away. This is one of those dimensions that's an example of that. Is APIs are one thing, right? We deliberately are writing a book where we're not saying like APIs are the silver bullet, go put APIs everywhere and you win. It could be, we'll write a book tomorrow. AI is the thing, it's going to change, like the paradigm shift is multidimensional. And so there's technology aspects to it, but there's organizational aspects to it. I've had the privilege in the past of sitting down with Mel Conway, who wrote Conway's Law, right? And he spent we did Conway's Law in 1967, I think, and had a whole unbelievable career after that. But he very much was focused on systems thinking and the linkage between all these things. So I think David, you could kind of write a book with that as the title, Organization Designs Suck. But I think that it's the relationship between the organization and all the things we're doing. So we don't spend a lot of time in the book going through optimal organizational designs. We certainly talk, and especially in that section on Cox, about some organizational considerations about if you want to be successful. He's talking about keep the shared services close to revenue, because one of the issues that we've seen organizations have is IT is a cost center. Yeah. Shared services are even more of a cost center, and they're the first thing to get cut when times are lean. But I think there's great, like Team Topologies is a great book that gets into the organizational designs. We kind of link to that. You could write a whole other book on the architecture of optionality and that. And I think the main thing for me is understand how all of these things are linked, of which, Conway's laws is the great way of illustrating that. But organizational methodologies and processes, practices, technology, it all kind of has to go together if you want to be successful.
One of the ways I used to say that, because I've known David for a while, is the more accessible way for people outside of org behavior and org design is all mobile plans suck. The question is, which one sucks less for you? Because what you're optimizing for counts. And while I totally believe that the team topologies guys, and we know them, and they're they're truly great and insightful about what they figured out. Too bad the business doesn't exactly care always on what optimizing your IT organization is not always the goal. It will be the goal sometimes, and under disruption will come for cost centers. And unless the big insight from David in that conversation was disruption will come. And the question is, like, how do you actually preserve, your investments in platform teams when the business can barely understand it? Like, and unless the business teams actually start to see the platform as the business, trying to create a platform-driven organization is at best, a momentary win that will be erased the moment that disruption comes for you. Because the business teams, they run the show at that time of disruption. Finance will clamp down on cost centers. They just will. And if and being able to, when you do what Matt said, which came from the David interview, which is move your API and other optionality capabilities closer to the point of revenue, that's the thing that will actually give you the bulwark, because it's the finance appears to run the show, but more than finance, sales and revenue owners. And that focusing on not just what is the optimal efficiency thing, but the thing that is sustainable at the place of where decision-making actually happens will keep your investments whole.
I think we can go on for another hour or so, but we need to wrap this up, this episode. Actually, I wanted to do a shout out to Matthew Emanuel. So the book you mentioned, Team Topologies, it's here on my on the bookshelf behind me. Guys, big thank you for sharing your insights. It was super interesting, and also to our listeners, obviously, for tuning in. So again, the book Unbundling the Enterprise is published at the IT Revolution, and we'll add a link to the show notes and to the article. And if you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe at itotinsider.com. And see you next time for more insights bridging IT and OT. And until then, take care. Bye-bye.